The Magicians podcast is brought to you in proud association with the Magic Circle, Alakazam Magic, and Gigio.
The rush of that is one of the moments that I would signify in my life as one of the top moments of my existence. I mean, wow. I think of it and I get teary-eyed because it is rare in the world that so many forces come together so tightly and so perfectly.
A living legend takes to the hot seat today on the Magicians podcast. Teller is my guest. Hello everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Richard Young. I am your host. Thank you very much for pressing the download button. I sincerely appreciate it. Do me a favour, if you enjoy these podcasts, then let a friend know. You've got friends out there who love magic. I know you do. We all share this wonderful and weird world together, and I would really appreciate your help in spreading the word. So if you enjoy what you're about to hear, and I know you will, this is a really special interview at the end. Please share it with a friend. It would really make my day. And if you can't be bothered to do that, then maybe leave the show a review on iTunes. If you have a device in your hand or a computer in front of you, that means you can leave the Magicians podcast a review on the iTunes store. It really helps with our ranking in the search engine on the iTunes store, and I would sincerely appreciate it. Okay, I think it's time to check in with our great friend Alan Hudson to find out what's been going on in the world of magic this week, and also to announce how this series is about to end over the next 3 weeks. I've been sitting on this for weeks. Today is the day. You're about to find out how this series is going to end over the next 3 weeks. Here we go. Let's talk to Alan. Alan Hudson, it is a big day for the Magicians podcast. Teller is on the show. But how are you, my friend? How was your week?
It is a big day, isn't it? And the even bigger day is I've been writing my presidential manifesto.
Have you?
Yeah, for the Magic Circle.
Brilliant. How's that going? So you come around to the idea, 100% committed. What's on the manifesto?
Well, for people that don't know, like last week on the Matt King episode, right, which was brilliant, by the way. That was an excellent one. And you managed to get loads of stuff out of him that I've never heard before. So I've often heard Matt King being interviewed on, or, like at magic conventions and stuff like that. And he's got a few stories that he tends to sort of do, a few times. And you managed to avoid all that and get loads of stuff out of him. So that was it, yeah. So people haven't listened to Matt King episode, go back one, listen to that.
Yeah, Mac was great on last week's episode. Really good. People seem to have really liked it.
Then in our bit, you dropped on me, will I be the next president of the Magic Circle? And I think I agreed, didn't I?
You did. I said, yep. I said Hudson, because we both agree, once this podcast ends at episode 100 on June the 21st, we both have absolutely nothing going on. And I was looking out for you as a friend, thinking about your future. And I said you should run for president of the Magic Circle in the elections in September, and you have agreed.
Yeah, well, so I've been writing my manifesto. Do you want to hear them?
Give it to me.
This is how I'm going to campaign. 1, you're allowed to wear shorts on a hot day.
Very good.
That'll go down well, especially with me, who once was not allowed in on a hot day when it was like 30 degrees. I was wearing shorts in London. I thought, I'll pop along to the Magic Circle. Banned. Not allowed in.
We're not actually banned as such, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm not allowed in. All right, so that'll be on it. You're allowed to wear shorts. 2, it's only open on a Monday at the moment. It's going to be open 7 days a week.
Yes, great idea. And what will you fill those other 6 days of the week with?
Don't worry about that. Now, 3, public shows. That would be good, wouldn't it? That'd be good. Now, I've not thought about the financial implications for numbers 2 or 3, but that's not really my job. That's Treasurer's job. I'm the ideas guy. 4, make Penn and Teller members, whether they like it or not.
Actually, you're going to hear Teller talk about the Magic Circle in this interview.
Oh, are we?
And it's quite controversial, what he says, I think.
Excellent.
He's just being honest. But yeah, I think, yeah, I think there's some people who are going to find what he has to say very interesting, and when you hear his side of it, you can't really argue, I don't think. So
yeah, good. Well, we can, as president, I would, if I get elected, I'm going to make them members. And number 5, no knobheads.
And do you want to talk about who those kind of people are, or?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I mean, look, this would be good, wouldn't it? It'd be good if I was president. I mean, at the moment, I can barely remember to keep my toothbrush charged, so I'm not sure how good I'm going to be at the admin.
Well, listen, it's fantastic news that you're going to run, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope all the members vote for you in the elections in September and make Alan Hudson president. Harry de Cruz started a hashtag which was Hudson for President, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So
yeah, one like.
It did, yeah.
Like.
It was, well, I think it was from me.
That was from me. For the honesty of the members, we are recording this on the Sunday, right? And so this is Sunday evening because you're about to go to the USA of America.
Yes.
I think that's how you pronounce it. But why are we doing this now? It's now 10 o'clock. Well, we were supposed to be doing this at about 8 o'clock, and you said, you sent me a text going, can we do it a bit later? And I said, why? You said, I'll tell you later.
This is unbelievable what happened to me today. So this afternoon I have been leeching. I did a wedding in a place that was a long way from where I live, like 3-hour drive, and lovely people. They'd met me before.
Can we just say there's going to be a lot of new listeners today because it's the Teller interview. Leeching. I mean, I was doing a close-up job. Okay.
So anyone who doesn't know. So I was doing a close-up job this afternoon, and it was all going fine. I was putting a block of plastic in people's hands, and yeah, I was doing all my usual stuff. It was all fine. It was a lovely gig. And then, job's done. They move on to speeches. I get my case, and I go to leave. So this is like a big old country house, like a massive, massive wedding venue that, I don't know, like it's like this old mansion. So they've all gone out to the marquee, which is in the garden where they're having the wedding breakfast. So I get my case and I exit the way I entered 3 hours earlier. And I walk through the bar into the hallway, and the front door, there's now like a door to the porch where the front door is closed. So I open it and I step into the porch, and the front door is closed. Right. So I just walk through, I grab the front door, and it's locked. I'm like, it's the front door. Why is it locked? This is like a wedding venue. So I'll go back the other way. I turn round, and the door to the porch that I have just come through has closed behind me and locked.
Right.
I am now stuck in a porch, right? A porch of a massive wedding venue. And I'm like, no way. No way has this happened. Anyway, so I obviously do what everyone does. First of all, I check every door 15 times.
Sure.
E.g. both doors.
Yeah.
And no, they're both locked. I'm now locked in a porch. So I'm like looking around going, well, there must be a way to open this door, or there must be a key. Anyway, long story short, no, there isn't. I'm stuck in this porch for nearly an hour.
An hour?
An hour. And of course, no one's there because they've hired this venue exclusively, and they've all gone out to the marquee. All the guests, the staff, the bar people, the waiters, waitresses, the management, they've all gone out to the marquee in the back garden. So I'm just stuck there. So of course, first thing I do is I go on my phone, I find the phone number for the venue, I ring and ring and ring and ring. No one answers. I'm literally just stuck there. So eventually, after about half an hour, I realised the only way I'm going to get out of this place is I have to start shouting and hope that someone hears me. So bear in mind, I've just done a pretty good job as a magician, but I'm now losing all integrity by just shouting at the top of my voice. And I'll be honest, it started off as hello, and about 10 minutes later that word changed to help. Help! And mate, I was in there an hour until eventually these two ladies came along and found me. I won't name the venue. They were all really nice. Who
found you?
Two people who had actually just arrived to do the evening shift, to do the evening reception. They'd come for a different part of the building, and they found me, and they were like, what's happened here? And so I explained, and they were like, turned out they'd both actually not been working there too long. So I'll be honest, by the time I'm found, I'm make out like I'm a missing person. Like, by the time I'm found, I'm actually I'm pretty freaked out, actually. I'm not claustrophobic. I've been in there a long time. And I had a lot.
Got a little tennis ball with drawn a face on it.
Wilson.
Made a friend. Drawn a little smiley face on your Omni deck.
It's like literally. So anyway, so they kind of feel bad and they go, let's get the manager. And yeah, this lady comes over and she's like, I'm so sorry that happened. And I was like, has this happened before? And she's like, no. So I don't know. It's just like a freak thing. But it absolutely... Well, when I text you and I said, look, I'm going to be late getting home, I was absolutely furious at that time. I'd lost an hour of my life.
I thought it was in McDonald's or something.
And as you know, I've got a lot to do tonight because of what's happening this week. So should we tell everybody?
Yeah. So it's a bad night to be late on for you. I'm fine. I'm doing nothing, as we know, just writing my manifesto. But yeah, you're going to the United States of America
tomorrow morning. So
tomorrow
Monday morning. So this is it. This is the big announcement. This is how the series is going to end. So
last 3 episodes. So this is the 4th to last today.
Yeah,
Teller.
Episode 97.
Amazing.
Teller, incredible. Obviously, more than fitting enough to be the end of a series. And if this series had ended at 24 episodes, this today should be the last episode. But it's not. We're going to go to episode 100. And so I had this. I'm going to use the word. I had a dream with regards to how I would love this podcast series to end. And as you all know, my absolute hero and idol in Magic, and right the way from my childhood all the way through to now and today, is David Copperfield. And as many of you know, over the years I've reached out to him a few times to try and get him on this podcast, and I've never had any luck. And also, those of you who know David's story fairly well, you will know that there are 2 other guys who have been with him for 25 years, and they are huge parts of the success of the David Copperfield story. And they're his co-director, Homer Luwag, and his executive producer, Chris Kenner. So I suddenly, about a few months ago, when I started thinking about how I could end this series, I had this dream, and I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if rather than ending at episode 97, we do episode 98 Homer, episode 99 Chris Kenner, and episode 100 David Copperfield. And when I was in Vegas a month or so ago, I managed to interview Homer, and I interviewed Chris Kenner. And
let's be fair, if that had been that would have been enough for you in a way, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course, both legends.
Because you're excited about their story because they're so close to Copperfield, and they've got their own stories and stuff, and you're really excited about when you spoke to me about it. You're going, I've managed to get them too. That's good. That's as much as you thought you were going to get, really, and you were happy with that.
Absolutely.
Because you thought, well, it's telling Copperfield's story, but just through other people.
Yes, absolutely. So both of those interviews have been recorded, and they're literally, Homer is next week and Chris is the week after. While I was in Vegas, obviously, of course, I explained to both Homer and Chris that, the dream would be to have all 3 of them, this incredible collaboration, these 3 amazing guys all together to end this podcast series. And it just didn't quite work out with David's schedule while I was there and everything. So literally, when I was about to leave, they gave me the amazing news that David Copperfield would be happy to be on the Magicians podcast, which was the most incredible news. But there was some bad news, which was he didn't have time. And so they started making inquiries along the lines of, can we do it over the phone or over Skype?
This is like Love Actually. It's almost like you were leaving at the airport.
Yes.
And then they came running down with the email to go, Youngie. Copperfield's like, I've got to get on the plane. You go, and then, but great news.
So I said to them,
you're going back?
I'm going back. I said to them, I just don't want to do it over the phone. I don't want to do it by Skype. As crazy as it sounds, I would love to just come back to Vegas and interview David Copperfield. So that is what is happening. Tomorrow morning, I fly to Las Vegas. And on Tuesday evening, so by the time you're listening to this now would have been 2 or 3 days ago, I'm meeting David Copperfield at his museum after his second show at the MGM Grand. And I am going to interview him for the series finale of this podcast. The greatest magician of all time is going to be on this podcast on June the 21st, episode 100, the end of the series. It's going to be amazing. So that's it. That's the end of the series. That's the next 3 weeks. So Homer Luwag is next Friday, June the 7th. Chris Kenner is on June the 14th. And then David Copperfield is on June the 21st, episode 100. And I cannot wait to go to Vegas tomorrow and to meet him and sit with him and look him in the eye. And I've got some amazing questions that I want to ask him, and lots of things I know he's never been asked before, because, you know, let's be honest, who normally interviews him? Jay Leno, David Letterman, Oprah Winfrey. This is who normally interviews him, and of course they interview him for the public, so the questions are always, you know, a little bit kind of, you know, just general, whereas I've got a really nice length of time with him, and we can talk to him in detail about his incredible life.
Yeah, be amazing, be brilliant.
I've got a couple of things I just want to mention this week. That is obviously, when you listen to this on Friday, all the Britain's Got Talent semi-finals will be happening this week. I hope all the magicians on it had a great time. 3 in particular have all been on this podcast series. Ben Hart, of course, John Archer and Jonathan Goodwin. I hope it all went fantastic for them, and I hope as you're listening to this, they are, I think John and Jonathan are both on Friday night. I hope they've all made it to the final, and it's a very magic heavy final. Also, just a tiny thing, I listened to Darren Brown on Desert Island Discs last week, which was on Radio 4. That's brilliant. If you like listening to Darren Brown, he's always great to talk to. And last Sunday he was on Desert Island Disc, which I think, as he said on Twitter, confirms him as a national treasure, because it's only legends who get onto that show, isn't it, on Radio 4? So what about you then, Hudson? What's going on at your end?
I listened to that as well, and never knew that you liked Rufus Wainwright and Ben Folds.
Are you a fan?
I am a fan, yeah. 2 more things I've got in common with Darren Brown. Amongst none of the other things.
So, Hudson, let's talk about today's episode. It's a biggie. And I've got to thank a couple of people, first of all, who helped this interview happen and become published. The first one is Henry White, our friend, who is actually a good friend of Teller's. And he really helped make all this happen. And also, as you'll hear me explain to Teller at the beginning, he came up with a lot of the great questions as well. And also, thank you to Darren Brown as well, who has helped with the process of this episode being published. He'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Not that he will have listened to this, of course, but I just feel I need to say it. So this was recorded backstage at the Rio. How many times have you seen their show in Vegas? Have you seen it much?
Yeah, I've seen it about 3 times, and one time I went to see it, I came out and I decided it was in my top 5 best magic shows I've ever seen in my entire life.
Wow, really?
There's just something about it, just everything clicks. Now, it's always brilliant, of course, right? But there's just one time, I think maybe the material, maybe the tricks connected with me a little bit more. There was a few things I hadn't seen before. It was the first time I'd seen Teller do the red ball, and do you know what I mean? Like a couple of bits like that I just went, oh my word, this is the best magic show, or one of the best magic shows in the world ever.
Well, he's absolutely, without a question, he's one of the world's greatest living magicians, isn't he?
Yeah.
This is just an amazing privilege, what you're about to hear, just to sit there with him for over an hour before their show, and he's Teller. I just want to mention this, actually. There are 3 people who have appeared on this podcast where when I edited their podcasts, I didn't have to edit them, because they are so intelligent and articulate and straight to the point. And one of them was Guy Hollingworth, the other was Darren Brown, and now this is the third one, Teller. Like, just where literally what you're about to hear is just exactly what he said. There's no ums, no ahs I had to cut out. There's no tightening things up or going, what's he trying to say there? He's just such a clever guy. And
yeah, he is super smart. And that's why he's brilliant. And that's why we all love him. And that's why I can't wait to listen to this episode.
Well, Hudson, thank you for your contributions today. We'll see you back here again next week for the first of the 3 David Copperfield interviews with Homer Luwag. It's going to be a brilliant 3 weeks, the next 3 weeks, but today is a really, really special day as well. Here he is then, without a doubt, one of the world's greatest living magicians. This is Teller. So I've made a lot of podcasts, and today is a really, really big day. When I started making these in 2014, I never could have imagined that one day I'll be sat here with one of my childhood heroes, Teller. Mr. Teller, thank you so much for doing this podcast, and welcome to the show.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
I'm going to be honest with you. We have a mutual friend.
Yes.
His name is Henry White.
Yes.
And I'm going to interview you today. But actually, Henry has written some brilliant questions. He's been a huge collaboration of this podcast, actually, with me.
Oh, he's an extremely genteel fellow. He's been enormously generous to me as a sort of guide and host when I've been in England.
Well, he's been very generous to me too. So there's some good questions here. The great questions are all Henry's. So I'll put that away right now.
Good going, Henry. Thank you so much.
So my first question actually is just, as this is primarily a British podcast, you guys have had the most extraordinary relationship with the UK over the last 30 plus years. Lots of TV shows. Obviously, you come over and sell out the Hammersmith Apollo. Why do you think that is? Why do you have such a great relationship with the UK that goes back so long?
We speak the same essential language that you folks do.
Yep. So
it turns out that we have an enormous following in Britain and in Australia. And not really that much anyplace else. We were just in China and Japan and walking along the street, constantly besieged by fans who were all either British or Australian.
Sure.
We had the great good fortune many years ago to do a television show for Channel 4 called The Unpleasant World of Penn and Teller.
It's legendary.
That it was an interesting experience for us because we had been doing television for many years in the United States and had pretty much never done television in Britain. So all of the material that we developed for American television was ripe to be compressed into these 6 shows. And they were extremely well produced and well directed, and somehow we managed to get people like John Cleese on with us, and Dawn French, and just Stephen Fry, and all the people all the British comic talent that we adored. So it was a very happy experience.
And actually, my memories of that series actually are quite vivid. That I was a kid watching it, but I remember John Cleese helped you actually with the water tank in that particular bit.
Yes, and was the funniest person we've ever had with that trick, because he kept a sort of matter of factness as I'm struggling and dying and choking and obviously in terrible trouble. He kept a sort of matter of fact interest. It was utterly hilarious. He is one of the funniest people on the planet.
A bit later in the interview, I'd love to talk about some of the tricks in particular, but actually this seems like the perfect time because one of them was the water tank, actually.
Yeah.
Just the development of that idea. Where did the idea come from to turn a water tank into a card trick?
Wow. Well, I mean, it came from the pressure of having to do a Saturday Night Live very fast. And as all the things that we do, it was developed out of a conversation between Penn and me. And every phase of it, I think, was really step by step. There is the classic image of Houdini upside down in the water tank, and we thought that the idea of a man not being upside down in a water tank in a heroic position, but in a business suit in a water tank, that was to begin with a very funny image. And then we discussed, when we're desperate for a plot, we always turn to card tricks. And there's been in the back of our minds for many years that someday we should do a show consisting entirely of card tricks, because we have so many card tricks that turn in so many different ways, from the giant card trick that we did with diamond plate aluminum cards that were about 2.5 feet by 4 feet, where we shuffled the cards using 2 forklifts, on through the hand stab card trick where I accidentally stabbed through Penn's hand. And so we in desperation for a compositional framework for a water tank trick, we thought of the combination of holding your breath and finding a selected card, with Penn being able to be totally preoccupied with the card trick and lose track of my condition as he failed to find the card again and again. And we also liked the idea that I should heroically at some point say, no, Penn, go find the card. And then when he does that, I begin to regret that decision. And then I think somewhere towards the end of that, the idea came to us that if the signed selected card ended up inside my diving mask, that would be a really good trick, a really good, a fooler that would get deep into people's bones. And so it was. And we did the first version of that the very first time we performed it on Saturday Night Live, with Madonna introducing us doing the card trick, and just a miscellaneous audience member following the time, and then that trick later developed into a feature of the live show. But the very first version of that trick, the equipment was faulty. And if you ever happen to watch the performance on television of us with Madonna introducing us on Saturday Night Live, you will see an expression on my face of extreme anxiety, which I am not acting at all. And if you look closely at the pictures of me, you'll see that, even my diving mask is starting to fill up with water as the thing proceeds. At that point we didn't know very much about safety the way we do nowadays. So our idea of safety was, if I opened and closed my hand with my fingers in a fan-like position, that would tell the guy off camera who had the key to the tank that I was drowning, and it would be very important to let me out right now. But we got to we got well into the trick, we got well into the problem, and this thought went through my head. Here's our choice right now. I can give this signal and be sure that I survive in great comfort. Or I can go just a little bit farther and wait just a little bit longer, and the worst thing that will happen is embarrassment before millions of people. And by just sort of keeping my nerve for a while, we managed to finish the trick, and we weren't embarrassed before millions of people. But it is a very important lesson that the avoidance of embarrassment is not a very good motive if you're in show business. So if you're in a position where you might get terribly embarrassed, but that's all that can happen to you, well, that's okay.
You touched on the fact that you've got a whole show worth of card tricks, and I know you've got some amazing opinions, and I'm fascinated to hear your opinion on this, which is, magicians sometimes think that the public just see a card trick as a card trick. It doesn't matter whether it's Ambitious Card or Anniversary Waltz or 3-Card Monarch, they just see them all as a card trick. How do you feel you can make all card tricks feel different? So like you said, you're considering putting together a whole show of card tricks. What can magicians do to make card tricks feel different to the same old plot?
We've gone to extremes. My examples are I think pretty clear. When you see the water tank card trick, do you think card trick? When people say, "Oh, I remember that thing you did with the water tank," they kind of remember that there was a card trick involved, but what they remember is the distinctive image of the water tank with the giant cards. We're shuffling cards on a forklift. That's significantly different from doing yet another Ambitious Card. I do believe that it is very important and very helpful to have some very distinctive physical activity going on in connection with a card trick that makes it different from all the others, because to us who do know the nuances of differences between card tricks, we say, "Oh my goodness, that was a fine version of Triumph." To the lay public, that's not necessarily so. It doesn't. I think the answer is make your card tricks really good. I think that it comes down to really pretty much make it good. Our good friend Johnny Thompson, who recently passed away, I'll tell you this story because it really strikes me. Johnny Thompson, I've done some Shakespeare plays, and I've directed them, and I've put magic into them. And I used Johnny Thompson as my primary magic consultant on these plays. And we were developing a version of The Tempest, and we were developing it here at this theater at the Rio All Suites Hotel in Las Vegas, and we were developing them right on our stage. And one afternoon, I had a whole cast of actors from Chicago and elsewhere working with me in the theater and with Johnny, and we were working on some really cool idea for Ariel to suddenly drop out of somebody's coat out unexpectedly. And we couldn't get it to work, and we couldn't get it to work, and we couldn't get it to work. And we were on it for 2 or 3 hours, and nothing looked magical, nothing looked surprising and good. And everybody was exhausted, everybody's brains were numb. And I decided, that we should just take a break of maybe 5 or 10 minutes, have a cup of coffee, and probably I would come back and say, well, we're done with rehearsal for today. You've done a good job, but everybody's too tired. So I went out and I sat on the loading dock behind the theater, and I thought it through, and I thought, yeah, probably best not to exhaust everybody's attention. Now, Johnny, meanwhile, was with the cast in the house. So I walked down the long hallway from the loading dock to the auditorium, and I begin, as I'm walking, to hear applause. And then I hear laughter, and I hear screams. And as I'm walking in the door, I see that Johnny has gathered all of the actors at the front of the stage, and he's just done 2 or 3 card tricks for them that had them screaming, laughing, and most important, remembering what the feeling of being completely bamboozled and thrilled and mystified and surprised by a magic trick was. They were all revitalized with the energy that, because he was a tremendous performer, the 2 or 3 card tricks that he did gave them. And I walked in, I looked around, and instead of saying, well, we're canceling the rest of the rehearsal, I said, okay, folks, back to work. And they went back to work, and we worked several more hours and made more progress. So, I mean, it is the singer, not the song, that you're talking about there. That you were watching Johnny Thompson do a card trick, and when he did, each card trick had its own very, very vivid and memorable character. I mean, his version of Triumph was exquisite, but he had the subtlest of subtle material presented with a sort of good-humored charm and at the same time a gravitas and a real sense of mystery that left people breathless. So it is entirely the quality of what you do and the character that you can give to each individual trick. I mean, when you look at somebody like Ossie Vind, for example, when he does his, the stuff that he does just takes your breath away. And yes, they're card tricks, but there's so much character to each card trick, and so much elegance and complexity that it isn't like he's whipping out, just another card trick. That putting that frame that gives importance to what you're doing around each thing is very important. The sort of thing that René Lavande was awfully good at. He could do some stupid thing with some bread balls in a cup and make you feel like you were watching a great work of art, because you were. But part of that was just knowing that the whole context had been given to the audience. He didn't turn them out one after the other. In fact, René Lavande that trick used to be his specialty. Do you know this? He used to arrange for that trick to be something that got asked for, even if it meant holding it back and holding it back and holding it back, and having his wife hint to people that maybe they should ask for that trick, so that when they asked for it, it was like a very special event. And card tricks at times can be very special events, or they can be just another run-of-the-mill repetitious thing.
That's amazing. What an amazing answer. I'm so pleased I asked that, because I wasn't sure. You mentioned a moment ago about the chat show you're on, and looking back, I think television was much more powerful then than it is now. You've done so many chat shows over the years. I've been watching clips over the last few days. I wonder if there are any moments from all those chat shows over the years that really stand out to you as a critical moment in your career that raised you guys to the next level.
On chat shows, our biggest step was when David Letterman had his chat show in the United States. It was a brilliant show. I mean, I don't know how much you guys got to see it, but David Letterman's level of wit was up there with Jonathan Ross. I mean, you know how incredibly present and witty and intelligent and daring Jonathan is. Well, Letterman was the American equivalent of that, and he had a wonderful set of writers, and he made huge breakthroughs on that show. And we happened to be playing New York off Broadway at the time that show was at its peak, and we were invited on that show. And we began by doing just one of our standard pieces where Penn's doing a card trick, and he gets on my nerves, and eventually I stab. It's a card stab, and I stab through his hand and can't get the correct card. And they liked that. And then they invited us back, and they kept saying what we needed to know in those days. What you needed to know if you were going to do that show was Letterman was very edgy and very aggressive, and his sense of magicians was not the loftiest. He didn't think that magicians were the pinnacle of entertainment. So he would very often get magicians on and then sort of snicker up his sleeve at how lame they were. So we were told basically by somebody who knows comedy and comedy writing very well that if you went on that show, either you got him or he got you.
Wow.
So we actually rehearsed with our friend Eddie Gorodetsky as Letterman, being as aggressive as he could possibly be in our office in Manhattan at the time. So anytime we'd go on that show, we had fenced, Penn particularly verbally, had fenced with someone very much knowing Letterman's sense of humor. And we began to think about things that we could do that would really get him. And we thought about how very tidy and clean and well-groomed he is, almost persnickety, you might say. And we thought, what would get him? And we thought, cockroaches. We think that cockroaches, a bunch of cockroaches on David Letterman's desk, would be a very startling thing, and he would respect us for that. So we set a trap for him, and the trap was that we came out and did a little magic routine to music that was an innocuous magic routine with silks and eventually the production of a rabbit out of a hat. And we asked the producer to just say to Letterman, when you're criticizing it, be sure that you say that it lacks surprise. So we presented it to Letterman, and then we said, David, give us a critique of that. And we had set him up with this one thing. We did want him to say it lacks surprise. And so he critiqued it, and by this time we'd taken the top hat that I'd pulled the rabbit out of and placed it crown upward, mouth downward on his desk with the rabbit sitting on top of it. And he said, well, I think it was a fine routine, good, little standard, kind of lacking in surprise. Then I said, oh, surprise, you want surprise, David? How about this for surprise? And then we lifted the hat. There was a mound of 500 cockroaches that swarmed over his desk. He stood up, swore, which was later removed from the broadcast, swore, really seemed very unhappy with it, and we seemed, we were perfectly calm and happy. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a second, but I'll tell you what happened the next morning that just thrilled us. Next morning, when we got to our office, there was a message on the answering machine from David Letterman, and it was, well, boys, I hated it, but it was great TV. Come back next time and hit me as hard as you want.
Wow.
Now, I don't know what that makes you think, but what it makes me think is that Letterman was a genius, who knew great television and who was willing to knew who he was, knew how he treated people, and knew exactly what we were up to. It was a wonderful experience. And in preparation for that, there was no small amount of preparation for that trick, because you don't just reach under your stove and pull out a handful of cockroaches and have that trick. We actually worked on it for the better part of a month with a professional entomologist who worked at the Museum of Natural History. He provided all the cockroaches for Creepshow, a movie that was popular at the time. And we trained with cockroaches because the idea was we had to be cooler than David Letterman.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't be freaked out by cockroaches. So there we were, sitting in an octagonal tower in this very Victorian Museum of Natural History in New York City with Dave Brody, our entomologist, putting cockroaches on our arms, and we're going, oh, and then you'd brush them off, and then a little later you could leave it on there for a little bit longer without screaming and putting it off. And finally we had the cockroaches running up and down our arms, and we were perfectly cool and comfortable with them. And we learned to pick up the Madagascar hissing cockroaches. Of course, if you're going to do cockroaches for television, I'll tell you this, magicians, if you're going to do cockroaches for television, you need to consider two things. You need to consider texture and articulation. Texture is the multitude of cockroaches that swarm over everything, and then articulation is is the vividly easy to recognize cockroaches. So we used a combination of some relatively slow-moving jungle cockroaches that were smaller and Madagascar hissing cockroaches, which are very large and quite repulsive. And when you pick them up, they curl into a little ball and go, and so it's a defense mechanism, and it's awfully unpleasant. But we went through that trouble. We went through the trouble to figure out how to do a load of cockroaches in a hat. If you just put cockroaches in a hat, they will cling to the walls of the hat and they won't come out. So we learned about exactly what you had to line the hat with and made a special load device that went in it that had 2 doors that would drop the cockroaches out on cue. So you ask about chat shows. I believe that was a signature moment in our chat show existence. In terms of important moments on television, probably the bit that we did on Saturday Night Live, in which we were doing a little magic routine that turned out to be done entirely upside down, was the most significant step. I believe it's the best piece of television, really, we ever did. And it was unbelievably difficult. And Saturday Night Live, I don't know whether you know this, but Saturday Night Live does not rehearse much, and this was a trick that required unbelievable precision. So here was the idea. Many, many, many decades ago, James Randi went on some television show, and hung upside down, unknown to the camera, and was like dropping popcorn up into the air. And Penn remembered that, and we talked to Randi about using that idea, and he said sure. And then we spent several weeks just experimenting with what you could do to misdirect the audience from being able to realize that you were upside down. And we thought, well, vanishes would be contrary to that. Levitations are natural, but vanishes, transformations, productions, all of those things would be good misdirection. So at the time, we had offices in the famous Brill Building in New York City, which is referred to often as Tin Pan Alley. It's the place where so many great pieces of music have been composed, and pop music have been composed there. And we just had rented an office there, and we got a bar, and some uprights, and we got gravity boots, and we got a camera, and we put the camera in the appropriate position and the monitor in the appropriate position, and experimented for a long, long, long time. This was quite a long while ago when hanging upside down would not kill me. It probably would today. Again, magicians, if you are over 50, don't hang upside down. It puts too much pressure on the backs of your eyes and can lead to glaucoma. However, I was in my 30s or 40s at that point, and I could handle it. And so we experimented endlessly to come up with that routine. But that routine required absolutely precision camera work. When one had to know the exact frame of the camera, because we were doing things like taking a little toy jet plane and seeming to make it vanish entirely by sleight of hand, but secretly just grazing the top of the frame, which was actually the bottom of the frame, and dropping it at a given moment. So it was like lapping, but upside down. And the frame of the camera had to be absolutely perfect. And Penn did a stunt in there that I cannot understand how anyone could possibly do it. But he's hanging upside down, and we're talking about levitating a light bulb. We referred to the Blackstone floating light bulb. And either I or he held a hoop, and he tossed this light bulb through the hoop and caught it on the other side while hanging upside down. This is a feat that, if it were not even part of a magic routine, would be staggeringly difficult. And we were all revved up, and we had learned that when you hang upside down, you turn very, very, very red. So the makeup people at Saturday Night Live had covered us with yellow makeup to counteract the redness of it. We got one rehearsal on camera beforehand, and we said, what the hell, there's no chance that this is going to work out. And happily, that one night, every shot was absolutely perfect. Dave Wilson, who was directing, was absolutely on the highest game that he'd ever been on. Every shot was perfect. Penn did that amazing throw perfectly, and the entire sequence, which must be 5 or 6 minutes of impossibly difficult precision stuff, worked with so little rehearsal at Saturday Night Live that it was terrifying, to absolute perfection. And then at the end, we reveal how it's all being done. Incidentally, the thing that really sort of made it was we were challenging other magicians to do magic live the way we were doing it. We said, we'll use no camera tricks. There's no special blue screen, no special anything. And in fact, this entire audience will be saying yes every time we say, are we live? Because we want to prove that we're not like those magicians who depend on special editing and that sort of thing. So we had the entire audience constantly screaming, are we live? Yes! They were all screaming this yes. And the energy in the room was so explosively vibrant because every time the audience screamed yes, they also were screaming with laughter because they realized the lie that they were helping to tell to the home audience. And at the end, when we invert and land on the floor and the camera reveals the whole situation, I remember the combination of the physical rush of feeling the blood rushing from my head to my feet, and the same with Penn, and the amazing rush of having accomplished an absolutely impossible thing when Saturday Night Live was pretty much at its peak at that point. So we were doing this perfectly impossible, difficult thing for millions of people, and we had pulled it off. The rush of that is one of the moments that I would signify in my life as one of the top moments of my existence. I mean, wow. It was, I think of it and I get teary-eyed because it is rare in the world that so many forces come together so tightly and so perfectly. I mean, there are other performances we did on Saturday Night Live that frankly sucked. That were just they're barely watchable. But this one moment was amazing, and still occasionally someone will have it up on their TV and show it to me, and I will get my face will turn red. My heart will race, and at the end I'll be filled with sort of the tears of joy. There's an interesting thing, an interesting after moment to that too, which was when we went back to our dressing room. Now Penn was, and it's a very tall and big guy, and he was yelling at the top of his lungs, very aggressively the whole thing, and tremendous amount of energy coming out of it. When we went back to our dressing room and took off the yellow makeup, his face was riddled with broken blood vessels.
Oh, wow.
Sort of like W.C. Fields in the latter stages of alcoholism, but riddled with these blood vessels. So there's this strange, eerie after moment where we're back alone in the dressing room after this moment of glory, and we're scraping off the yellow makeup, and Penn is there looking kind of wonderfully ghoulish. That is an afterbeat that I remember. Those are two of the things. Now, I wish I could cite moments in Britain that were that powerful for us. But by the time we did The Unpleasant World of Penn and Teller, which that was named. Oh my goodness, it's the head of the network who named that show, and I'll think of his name shortly, I'm sure. But that's one of the best titles we've ever had of any show.
That's great.
We're not good at titles. But that is the Unpleasant World of Penn and Teller. What a great title!
It's fantastic. I wondered if you would say that the moment that perhaps gave you the biggest adrenaline rush was the first time the truck ran over you. I mean, with all the precision that had to happen there and the science and everything, but ultimately there comes a point where you have to lay there and have to give it a go. It's sort of one of the first things I ever saw you do, actually, that TV special. I remember it being shown on ITV in the UK quite late at night. My mum and dad let me stay up and watch it. And what are your memories of that big stunt? It's probably one of the biggest things you guys ever did, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it was precisely because NBC had said we want a big trick, and Penn recalled that when he was at clown college, he was taught the rules of what must be in a clown gag, and one of those things was a blow, and one of those things was a blow off. And he said the perfect clown gag would be for one clown to just run over another with a truck and kill him. That's the perfect clown gag. And so we started to talk about that as an idea. And I was actually away in Australia learning to scuba dive when Penn pitched that idea to NBC. He really didn't have my consent to pitch it, but by that time we knew. We could sort of begin to tell what was a possible idea and what wasn't. So he pitched that idea, having no idea how we could possibly do it, basically promised that idea as the feature of the show, I came back from Australia. He said, "Well, here's what I pitched." And I said, "Okay, well, let's see if we can do it. Let's work it out." And the method was a little more complicated than the method that we explain.
Oh,
because
really?
The method that we explained didn't take safety into account.
Sure.
And we're obsessed with safety. So in addition to the counterweighting of the truck, in addition to the foam tires, there was also a black safety wheel that was running on a piece of metal that was camouflaged against the street, just to make sure that if there was something wrong in the other calculations, that would be fine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And of course, we did all the safety tests first. We didn't. I was not.
I'm assuming you weren't the first person to lay
I
down.
wasn't the first person, and it was also didn't start with a person lying down. It started with just a dummy lying down.
Yeah.
We love the idea of looking around ourselves to see where the dangers and the ideas lie. I mean, in the show that you'll see tonight, you'll see a thing that we do that is basically it's just a mentalism routine, and it's just a mentalism routine with a prediction involved. But it's I emailed Penn one day and I said, you know, all the work that we did with billets when we were crazy about seances years ago, and we have the most sophisticated billet work you could possibly want. You know, no electronic clipboards, no nothing. It's just cards and people write things down, and we do switches and glimpses and all kinds of things. I said, what if we made the thing that people were writing down their passwords? And Penn went, oh boy, this is a really good idea. And then we worked through the routine on that. But you know, we all think about our passwords all the time. So looking in the real world for a real subject that people actually care about, as opposed to the more arbitrary things, you know, running a needle through a balloon, I don't know. You know, that's not something that is deep in my heart.
Yeah. I did wonder that your kind of relationship with exposure. You've obviously, like you said, that was, you know, you gave away the big finish of your TV special, and then you just showed how it was done. There's other examples, you know, countless examples over the years. Has your relationship with exposure changed over the years as we've moved more into like an internet world where any answer to any question is nothing more than a Google search away?
That's a good question. Here's the thing that I think some magicians, like the magicians at the Magic Circle, have never tipped to. And that is that pretty much everyone in our culture knows a certain amount about magic. It is really a developmental stage that we all go through from age 8 to 12, where, you know, you get your magic set, you get your set of linking rings. Everybody, I believe everybody over the age of 16 knows that the word palm means to hide something in your hand. You just know these things. A switch is something that's not even jargon in magic. To ditch something, you know, we think that's all jargon, but people say, you know, I'm going to ditch my wife for this. Yeah. That means getting rid of. People know about things like threads. They know about things like trapdoors. And if you come out as a magician and you behave as though your knowledge of these things gives you a great exclusivity and a great insider's perspective, you will be insulting your audience. It is insulting to come out with that point of view. And most people who come to a magic show have seen magicians who have insulted the audience implicitly or explicitly by treating them as though they're benighted savages. So one of the things that we did early on was to find ways to say, we know that you know a certain amount about magic. We know we are on your side. And the earliest example of this, I think, was when we first worked the cups and balls. Now the cups and balls happened because Penn and I were at a truck stop. That's a highway restaurant, and I was practicing the cups and balls obsessively, as I tend to do, and annoyingly, as I tend to do. And we were sitting there, and I had finished my glass of water, and I had rolled up a paper serviette, and had a second serviette rolled up. And I took my water glass and I put it with the bottom of it up and the mouth of it down on the table. And I put on top of the bottom of the glass, rolled up, a roll-up napkin, and I had palmed in my right hand a second napkin. And I did that classic Professor Hoffman move. I think it's a Bosco move, actually, where you tip the ball that's sitting on the cup off into your hand at the same moment that you load it.
Yes.
And as I did that, the both of us realized that neither of us had seen or experienced the load. The load was in full view, but one's eye was so occupied with the movement of the ball from the top into the hand that you weren't seeing that. And that began a whole discussion where we said, could we do an entire routine of the cups and balls in which all the moves, all the loads were in full view but not seen? Because your mind, it's sort of like the that famous experiment with the gorilla going through the basketball players, where it's there but you just don't see it because your brain isn't focusing on it. We thought, could you do an entire routine of cups and balls that's based on this idea of the audience's attention is so taken by one thing that they're not seeing what's in full view? We thought this was a beautiful idea. I'm a big fan of contrapuntal music, like Bach stuff, where there's one line is going on, with the tenor is singing one line, and the soprano is singing another line, and they somehow happen to go together really nicely, because Bach could really do that stuff well. And I thought, this is sort of like that counterpoint, where two things are happening at the same time, and you're focused on this melody, but the accompanying melody you're not really perceiving. You're experiencing it, but you're not perceiving it. And we got this nice routine together, and then we thought, well, how do you present that without it seeming pretentious? What are you going to say? We're going to present you with a contrapuntal piece of magic in which your attention will be carried. No, that's horrible and stupid. And so, well, why don't we pretend we're exposing the trick? Why don't we say we're explaining how this trick is done? And that's of course a great and ironic way to describe it, because we're actually doing a very complex trick and calling it an exposure. Well, the news that we were doing this got up to the Magic Castle, which was located in Hollywood about 4 blocks from where we were performing at this theater. Magicians heard that Penn and Teller were exposing the cups and balls and went into a fury over this. And there was all the chatter, this was before all the internet chatter, but it was all this horrible chatter about the terrible things that Penn and Teller were doing. Well, of course, when Dave Vernon came to the show, he sat in the front row, saw the routine, and laughed his head off because he got it. But the amateurs, the guys who don't understand why you're performing, who don't understand anything about the art of magic, who only understand the cult of secrets, like, say, I don't know, people at the Magic Circle, who I believe only understand the cult of secrets, they got all up in arms, which was wonderful, because the madder they got, the more we publicized that we were the bad boys of magic. We put the bad boys of magic as our sub-headline underneath the marquee of our theater. And the press, it was a whole wonderful thing for the press to talk about. Oh, here are these magicians who are violating the magician's code, whatever that be. And all because we wanted an ironic explanation of this very complex and beautiful idea. And since then, there are other things that where we found that, for example, if you say, pretty much everybody has seen the movies where somebody does a code act, right?
Yes.
And they understand that you pick up this object and you say to your person on stage, I am looking here at a strange device, and that's somehow coding what the object is. So now in our show we have a bit about coding, in which we acknowledge that the audience knows that much about verbal coding, and then we take it to a very, very far reach. So people end up being quite fooled by it. There was a trick we did called Lift Off to Love.
Oh, I love it. It's my favorite one.
So here's the whole thing that began that trick. Penn said, I want to do a trick that has a lot of trapdoors in it. That was the whole beginning of that trick.
That's great.
And so we said, okay, let's see if we can come up with a trick that has more trapdoors in it than you could ever possibly use. So we had a little workshop on the Hudson River, and we experimented forever to try to come up with a routine that looked plausible as a magic routine. And we knew that people had seen those routines where the boxes are rearranged and the people are rearranged in boxes. And so we came up with a routine that sort of looks like that. And then we faced the hardest problem of all, which is, how do I slip slide underneath that? And we thought, oh, we could strap, the device that's called a mechanic in a garage. It's like a skateboard that mechanics strap to their back. We thought we could strap that to Teller's back, and he could go back and, well, no, you can't get in and out of trapdoors with a mechanic strapped to your back. And we finally found that by just making a plexiglass floor and spritzing it with silicone spray, that I was able to slide back and forth, like a little rodent. And then, having constructed the routine, we invited our favorite composer, Gary Stockdale, to fly out and spend a week or two with us composing a piece of music to go to the routine. But it's a piece of music that's this wonderfully dated rock and roll sort of piece of music about space launches.
I think it's one of the most memorable pieces of music ever used in Magic, actually.
Well,
I don't think anyone ever forgets it. It's just so great.
And it composed exactly for the routine that we had there. We didn't go and say, what popular piece of music shall we now choreograph this levitation to? We had the music composed for that purpose. And we've always been very strong on, when we use music, it should be absolutely tailored to what we're doing. That same television special had Penn and Carol Perkins eating fire, to a beautiful Satie-like romantic number that was composed beat for beat for that routine.
Wow!
You can't underestimate the power of music, but you also can't abuse it. And I believe lots of magicians sort of abuse the power of the music by exploiting people's fondness for a piece of music to conceal the fact that their own routine itself doesn't contain the emotion that the music carries, because music can do a tremendous amount to carry emotion, but if you use it instead of the routine to create the emotion, I always feel like that's a sort of a cheat. It's one of my quirks to think that.
Last off.
First stage, you really blew my mind. Next stage, I reached but could not find.
The Magicians Podcast, brought to you in association with the Magic Circle, the world's premier magical society. Are you ready to join the world's most exclusive magic club? Visit themagiccircle.co.uk to find out more.
Gigi-O, free for 30 days. Be a pro, get Gigi-O.
Neil Kelso says it's the biggest time saver. What's he talking about? Well, Gigi-O, of course. Top professional magicians love using Gigi-O to manage their bookings and admin. It's an easy-to-use web-based software that takes care of your inquiries, contracts, invoices, payments and reports. You can generate professional PDF contracts in seconds and allow your clients to agree them online quickly and conveniently. Gigi-O will even automatically update the diary on your phone. Read what other top magicians say about Gigi-O and take a free 30-day trial right now at getgigio.com. GetGigio is spelled GetGigio.com.
Whether you're new to magic or a seasoned professional, Alakazam Magic are here to help. Alakazam have been supplying magic to magicians for well over 20 years. Not only do we carry all the latest and greatest magic tricks, books and DVDs, but we also manufacture one of the finest ranges of magic tricks in the world. The Alakazam name is synonymous with great customer service, educated advice and honesty. So if you're shopping for new magic, make sure you check out our website www.alakazam.co.uk or pay a visit to our fully stocked shop.
And my personal favourite of all of the thousands of products that Alakazam have is the Alakazam Online Magic Academy. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the website and take a look at it. It's a brilliant new way of learning magic. There's new content added to it frequently. And also, it's this wonderful community that you get to join as well. And you all learn magic together. And it really doesn't matter whether you are a full-time professional magician, an amateur, or a hobbyist. It's just a brilliant, modern way of learning magic. If you've never taken a look at it, go and do it right now. That's the Alakazam Online Magic Academy.
In my galaxy, lift off for love, lift off for love, lift off for love. Baby, hold on to me. Escape velocity. Lift off for love. Hey, lift off for love. Lift off for love. Lift off for love.
Blast off!
Mentioned a few times now, and I honestly can't wait to hear your answer for this. You've mentioned the magic circle a few times.
Yes.
And over the years, you know, publicly, there's always been this thing that you guys don't get on with the magic circle, but then likewise, you'll visit the headquarters and give a lovely talk on the stage.
It's very strange.
Also, I heard a rumor, and I wonder if you can tell me if this is true, or whether you're happy to talk. If you're happy to talk about it, which is that recently you guys asked to join. Is that true?
Well, no. Here's what happened. We had heard of the Magic Circle as a very highly respected and venerable magic organization in London, founded by the likes of David Devant. And so when the Magic Circle contacted us and said, we're doing an exhibition that we'd like to include something from your bullet catch in, we were very flattered. And we said, why sure. And we provided them that, and then later when Paul Daniels passed away, they asked if we would write an article for the Magic Circular, I think.
Yes.
Talking about what we thought of Paul Daniels. And we had enormous respect for Paul Daniels, a real pioneer in magic. And then having done all of that and knowing that many of our friends were members of the Magic Circle, we said, by the way, are we being invited to join? And we got a letter back saying, no, I'm sorry, you guys, we're not considering you for membership because you guys have exposed so much magic. And we were our reaction was to kind of laugh at that. And there are many very nice people at the Magic Circle, really, people that are extremely kind and nice. They asked me the last time we were over if I would come and lecture to the membership. I did it happily because I love talking about magic to people who like magic. They asked me if I would talk to the young people there. I did, and still, we intermittently we've said, and so you're still not inviting us to be members. Is that correct? And the answer keeps coming back. No, you guys are exposers. We can't have that. And then, of course, later we learned that David Devant himself was thrown out of the Magic Circle for writing, it was a magazine article or something that explained
so,
magic.
yeah.
Or it was either that or was it his book, Secrets of My Magic, that was explaining his own methods, not other people's methods, but his own methods that got him thrown out. And then we began to realize that we were dealing with a bunch of amateurs, dealing with a bunch of really hobbyists, who think that the idea of secrets is some kind of it has some sort of magical quality to it, and that we really I don't think I'm going to be having more lectures over there because I find that being made use of, displaying our props, having me lecture there. And then saying that I'm something that is unworthy to be called to be part of magic, that I am a poisonous element that demeans magic. It seems horrible, inconsistent, and rude. So my relationship with the Magic Circle is I laugh at them a lot, and we've made fun of them from the stage quite a bit. Including the fact, of course, that the Magic Circle seal has a Latin motto, which
You're a former Latin teacher.
I'm a
aren't you?
former Latin teacher. Yeah.
It's not what they thought it was. Is that right?
No, they think it means not apt to disclose secrets. And it is in fact, and they know this. I mean, their historian himself, there's a historian there who said to me, "Oh yes, we know that it's wrong. It's from a description of Julius Caesar trying to go in disguise among the people, and they don't, and he can't get away with it because the way he talks is very rhetorical and very much, sort of like if Donald Trump tried to pass unnoticed, that you'd recognize him by his style of speech, and it means not skilled at speaking of commonplace things." So it's quite hilarious at every level.
That's honestly the best answer I could ever hope for. That's absolutely brilliant. So I've heard magicians say that Penn and Teller only give away the secret to a trick if the secret is more interesting than the trick. Now I'm curious, did that ever come from you guys, or is that just something magicians have made up? Because if that is the case, why did you never decide to give away the secret to the bullet catch, which is the most incredible piece of magic?
As you know, the secrets to most pieces of magic are ugly, right? And in fact, the uglier the secret, the better, right? Because if a secret is elegant, if a secret is something that's really clever, well, that's something that will appeal to young magicians who want to learn a clever secret. But most secrets are terribly good. Secrets are terribly ugly, and therefore are not something you want to show to the audience, because what you want to show to the audience is the beautiful. You want to show the audience things that are beautiful and delightful, not ugly. So when we've taken people backstage, our backstage is something like liftoff. Now, no magician in his right mind would use that method for liftoff, because it has all those trapdoors and it uses all this operation under the stage that most magicians don't have availability for, and it's also a stupid way to accomplish it. But it's a fascinating make-believe method for a trick. So when we've been able to create a method that is interesting, intriguing, and complex enough to be an entertainment in itself, then that's a fine method to explain.
I'm in a double act, and we're not quite as successful as Penn and Teller, but also it's a conversation Sam and I have had a few times, and I've had other double acts, very good double acts on this podcast, and one of the questions I always find fascinating to ask a double act is whether you and Penn ever talk about the end of the act, like, e.g., nothing lasts forever. Do you ever talk about the end of you two working together?
Yes, we do. In fact, when we first got together, because we had been part of a 3-person group for a long time, we discussed that if at some point the act should come to an end, the surviving person, the person who is continuing, would have access to all the material without any question, without any royalties or anything like that. We've always been 50-50 on everything, so it's always been. Any questions of money or property are just 50-50, and that's that. Now we're getting up in years. Penn's in his 60s, I'm in my early 70s, I'm 71. And, one has to look ahead and say, well, in 15 years, am I still going to be able to do this? And who knows? But our intention is to work together as long as both of us survive.
Yeah.
And we've made such an investment, 44 years worth, in learning to work together, that seems like the wise thing to do at this point, because we get plenty of chances to exercise our individual talents on other projects. Penn's got 3 books out. I have 1 book out, but it was from a long time ago. We've both done independent television stuff.
He has his own podcast.
Independent writing stuff. I've done Macbeth, and I've done The Tempest, and I've done Play Dead, which are 3 major theatrical ventures that I'm very excited about. I've done my little series of zombie movies, the Ann Taylor movies. So we have plenty of chances to work separately and to work with other people.
But does Penn and Teller always come first?
Yeah, it does. It does, and we're now in a comfortable enough position that if something like one of those things becomes, demands something. Like I had the chance to be on The Big Bang Theory this year a couple of times, and that's a huge show. And we knew that my being on the Big Bang Theory would benefit the Penn and Teller following very much. So we canceled several shows. Penn and Teller did not literally come first those nights that I was there, but in the big picture, obviously, yes.
It's the big picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
As a Brit, I visit this incredible town every year or every couple of years. It never ceases to amaze me. It's how does Penn and Teller feel about Las Vegas? How has it changed over the years? You've been here for a long, long time now. This is 19 years here at the Rio as a headliner.
Yeah. When we first came here, I'm actually quoting Penn about this, but I think he's completely accurate. When we first came here, anybody who was really sophisticated came here with a wink. That is, we were past. There was the sort of the glory days of everybody would go to the nightclubs in tuxedos, and your entertainers would be Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and that whole thing. Then there was this middle period where everything that was going on was very half-assed. It would be third-rate impressionists, people doing imitations of famous singers, and there was a sort of a cheesiness. And when we first got here in the early 1990s, the cheesiness dominated the entertainment scene, and now I don't really know what fully is going on. The latest trend, which I find fascinating and mystifying, is celebrity DJs. Where there are these nightclubs that are getting huge attendance, and in which there are these people who become celebrities by playing other people's recordings. I find that a little mystifying, just because it doesn't seem that human to me. And we have Cirque du Soleil, which is another sort of dehumanizing thing. Cirque du Soleil does fine work. It's just never about individuals sharing their hearts with the audience. I mean, you do have cool stuff like Absinthe. Absinthe is a pretty great show. And you have individual performers. I mean, we have Mac King, we have Copperfield, we have a bunch of good, identifiable personality performers. But the overall trend is this sort of moving to this dehumanized thing. So I think we are bucking the tide. The tide says people should become more anonymous, and we're saying no. There's a place for individuals.
Why do you guys constantly develop new material? I mean, you don't really have to. You've got so much, years and years of content, hours and hours of TV stuff. But even in the last few years, I know there's new stuff going in the show. I just wonder why you do it, actually.
We love to. There is nothing that I love in the world, not food, not sex, not travel, more than I love sitting in a room coming up with new ideas and coming up with new ways to turn some notion into something of beauty and complexity and surprise and irony and political implications or whatever. There's nothing I love more than that. And in Plato's Symposium, which I read in the original Greek in college, a bunch of philosopher types are sitting around having a drinking party, and they've decided that their entertainment is going to be, they're going to talk about see if they can define love. And people like Aristotle come up with great funny descriptions of, love really happens because when man was first formed, they were all double people, and they got too impudent, and the gods split them, and you're always looking for your other half. And they come around, and finally they come to Socrates, and Socrates talks them through an argument that leads to this conclusion. He talks about what do you call love, and the term that he comes to is birth in beauty. And the classic example of that is children. Love is when you conceive and raise a child. That is what love is. And birth in beauty is the thing that I think I experience when we're working on new bits, and this incredible sense of love between the collaborators and with the audience and all of that happens when a new idea comes into existence, like a little born baby. That's the lofty reason. The practical reason is we have this show called Fool Us, and Fool Us requires that at the end of every show we do a piece that hasn't been on Fool Us before.
Right.
Well, this means that for the duration of the series, however long it lasts, we're going to need 14 or 15 new closers for that show every year. So our job includes as part of its job description, spend the entire year before the shooting of Fool Us coming up with 14 or 15 new bits. And sometimes there are adaptations of things because you just, you can't get the wholly, you can't do an entire show of running over me with a truck because that just takes too much new material. That when we worked on, I forget how many, it was like 3 years to come up with the material for that show, and it was maybe 10 pieces. So, there are some things that you will recognize as adaptations on Fool Us. But, so we have the carrot of birth and beauty before, and the stick, that is, Fool Us needs these behind. The carrot before, the stick behind. Birth and beauty before, Fool Us behind. Driving us to create new stuff when I think most people at this stage of their career would be resting on their laurels.
Fool Us has had an amazing run, hasn't it? I just wonder, over all the seasons that it's done and all the magicians you've seen, what memories from it really stick out for you?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's... Well, the very first person who came up on the first season of Fool Us in Britain, our first season there, was Sean Farquhar, and he fooled us with a card trick. And the sense of absolute terror that went through both Penn and me, that every single person was going to come on and fool us and we would look like idiots, was very, very deep. This memory will stick with me for quite a long while. So many lovely moments. Piff the Magic Dragon coming on and doing, not knowing at the time that this would be essentially the start of his major rise as a television star and a live performance star, certainly sticks in my head as a major thing. Oh heavens, let me think. The fact that Mark Wilson and Nani Darnell came on one of the shows, considering that those were the people that I watched every Saturday afternoon as a child, is certainly going to stick with me. Helen Coghlan from Australia, who has fooled us multiple times, very earthy mom type of woman, very sort of just like the woman next door, who came on and just fooled the hell out of us. Very interesting. She's a 94-year-old father who's Australia's outstanding escape artist. She sticks with me too. I'm trying to think who else. We've had so many wonderful people on there, especially people who come back. We truly never know who's coming on, right? We play no part whatsoever in the booking of the show. They're not even allowed to walk down the same hall that our dressing rooms are in. So when people come out and suddenly we go, oh, there's Paul Gertner. I haven't seen him in forever. That's quite a thrill. Oh, Paul Daniels did one.
Yeah.
Which was we knew he was in the audience that night. We did not know that he was going to turn out to be the punchline of that show. That was great.
Also, a funny thing, but Paul Daniels always used to refer to the Magic Circle as a club for amateurs, which is interesting because that's what you said as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think that there are most of the really serious professionals, though they might be involved with the club, don't take that element of it very seriously. I mean, I won't name names, but virtually every professional who seems like a real professional seems to think that the Magic Circle needs to get its act in order.
There's one last thing I'd like to touch on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's the last two things we've talked about. This man was a big part of both of them, and that's your collaborative, your process of collaboration with new material, and also Fool Us, which of course was Johnny, who passed away recently. I just wonder if you could just give us a little bit of an insight into how big of a part of your life he has been professionally.
I met Johnny Thompson in 1976 at the Society of American Magicians convention in Philadelphia. The magicians were staying at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel that later became famous as the origin of Legionnaire's disease. Johnny and Pam were in the first few years of performing Thompsonian Company, and they performed on stage at the Philadelphia Academy of Music. And Penn and I and our third partner at the time did a few pieces on that same show. We went to the convention afterwards, and I learned that somebody was going to be doing an egg bag talk in one of the ballrooms. I thought, an egg bag talk? Oh, for Christ's sake, I got to see this. Because I had seen the egg bag done by a clown birthday party magician when I was a kid. I had bought, your typical plaid egg bag and tried to make it into a trick, and it was a horrible trick. It's obvious. The egg goes into the bag, and it goes into a pocket, and then you pretend to show that it's gone. And there's just no magic there. So I go into this room full of magicians, many of whom are also skeptical about the egg bag. And out comes this very well-dressed, slight, just a hint of sort of gangster in his elegance, person, doing a routine with a black egg bag and a snow white egg, and he fries every single magician in this room, absolutely fries them with this routine, which, thanks to the combination of wit and gravitas that he presents it with, it feels like as close as you would ever want to come to genuine magic. And I am one of the people who's completely fried by this. And at the end of this, everyone's walking up and congratulating him. I wait my turn, and I walk up to him, and I rave about what he's just done and told him he's completely mystified me. And then, being, I guess I must have been 28 years old at the time, I said to him, you know that move that people do when they're producing a wine glass, where they've hidden the wine glass under their arm, and the wine glass has a cover and it keeps the liquid inside. Then they show a silk empty, and then they pick up the wine glass, and they hold the wine glass by its foot, upside down, with the wine glass hanging below, and the handkerchief draped over the hand.
So the handkerchief can be flat on the hand.
The handkerchief can be flat on the hand, while the wine glass is actually being held just upside down underneath the fingers. You know that move? And then they pull up the handkerchief, and suddenly the wine glass is there, and it's quite a miraculous-looking appearance. I said, what if you did an appearance of the egg in the egg bag? By having the egg in place when the audience doesn't know that it's there, but having it on your lowered third and middle finger, so that you could pat the top of the egg bag as though hitting the flat of your hand, and then let the egg rise into position as though it was just formulating there.
Wow.
And Johnny looked at me and he said, I see. So you're a real magician.
Wow.
Now, put aside for a moment that he's just justified the next 40 years of my life, and think about what that says about Johnny Thompson. Here's a trick that has evolved over at least, many generations of magicians, but been perfected by Malini, Charlie Miller, and Johnny. And it's been brought to a degree of perfection. It began with De Beer and those guys who were starting to use that kind of egg bag. It's been brought to that level of perfection. He has just fried an entire room full of magicians with this effect. And here this 28-year-old kid comes up to him and proposes an idea, and Johnny actually listens, because he thinks there might be something there that might somehow improve that. And one of the things that Johnny frequently said was most magicians stop thinking too soon. And there you see it in action. This made Johnny the best possible collaborator, because he would bring to any session where we were working on some brand new idea every bit of information that he had from the past, which was considerable because he knew really everything there is to know about stage and close-up and parlor. He was as they like to call him, a general practitioner of the first order. He would bring all of that, and then he would deliver all of that, and then that would be the end of that, and from there on you were on equal footing with him, and you could argue back and forth. There have been days when I've worked with Johnny when he's thrown up his hands and said, I can't work on this anymore, and just walked out in a rage because he thought I was up the wrong alley. And then he'd be back the next day and working again, and we'd move forward. He had the passion to know exactly what he thought might work, and the humility to know that there might be a better way to do it. And so the result was any room in which he was a place in which everybody got better. Everybody got more creative in the room, because he was just sort of like a catalyst who would make everybody think better. And we had the pleasure and joy of being able to have that right in our town, and at every rehearsal that we had for about the last 15 or 20 years. And that resource was incomparable. And the one consolation that I have in losing him is that he gave so much knowledge to so many people that all of the bits and pieces of Johnny are here. They're here with us and ready to be used. And one of the things that Penn and I are doing is we're trying to connect up with all the people who worked with and loved Johnny, not just as out of respect for him, but because that makes those connections and that knowledge just makes the community stronger and better, and the life that he gave us, we're able to give to each other. So, one of the most amazing experiences was that Penn and I for years had the idea of doing a cover tune. We wanted to do somebody else's act exactly the way they had done it. The way they sort of used to do at the Magic History Conference, where they would take like the Thurston Rising cards, try to reproduce a Thurston performance. And I kept looking through my books and saying, where's a great magician of the past that we could learn this act? And then Johnny and Pam were doing a zombie video with me, and part of what they were doing was they were doing their act in a trailer for an audience of the undead tied to chairs, just to keep their act in practice after the zombie apocalypse had descended on Las Vegas. Sorry, I'm hiccuping. And I looked up and I thought, here's a masterpiece of an act, and the people who are doing it have just retired this act, and they could teach it to us. Oh my God, this is the act we've been looking for. And then I spent a year and a half learning moves, and then Johnny and Pam coached Georgie and me through the act, and it was in the show for quite a long while, and a version of it was on Fool Us. And it will be back in the show once I can emotionally handle it, because I will never be, nor will Georgie be as good as Pam. I will never be as good as Johnny Thompson. That act was perfect for him. He was a great comic actor. He was a great actor, period. Both he and Pam had training at the Actors Studio. These are really fine actors. I haven't had that kind of acting training. Johnny was a fantastic manipulator. Every bit of that act that looks so effortless is stuff that for me is still an impossible climb all the time. So I will never get that effortless. But the attempt to do that, I think, has made me much better, and I'm happy to get back to doing that.
Teller, this has been, I had high expectations for this podcast, but it's absolutely blown me apart. It's so thought-provoking. It's an amazing privilege to sit and listen to you talk.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
So I just want to say sincerely thank you so much for being on the Magicians Podcast.
I think you're giving me too much credit. It's a little like your cat has never spoken to you before. Now suddenly your cat says a few simple sentences and you think it's a miracle. But thank you for the compliment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you know what's truly incredible? About 25 minutes after that interview ended, Teller walked on stage with Penn at the Rio and did a show for a sold-out crowd. What a truly incredible magician he is. Thank you so much again, Teller, for being on the Magicians Podcast. So it is time now to look towards the end of this story. As I mentioned earlier, it will happen through an incredible trio of interviews as we look at this fantastic collaboration of these three incredible people. And it will begin next week. Episode 98 will be with Homer Luwag. He is the co-director of David Copperfield. He is responsible for everything that you see and hear in the show. All of the video, all of the music, all of the props, all of the lighting. He has an incredible story to share, and I know you're going to absolutely love it. So make sure you don't miss it. Make sure you subscribe to us, and make sure you come back to the feed again next Friday for episode 98. These next few weeks here are going to be really special. They're going to close the circle for us here in the most perfect way. Can't wait to share them with you. I'll see you next Friday. Have a great week. Take care. Bye bye.